This is the HR meeting at the Victorian State Agency. I'm not recording the name, so it will be here. My first question is, why are we doing it? The whole performance review system or management system?
Well, there's a few answers to that. The easy answer is because we have to.
Yeah.
Because there's an enterprise agreement that says we do it, and we have to have a system to do it, and we have to manage people's performance. There's also the general obligations under the Public Administration Act that managers are charged with a legal responsibility to manage the work of the agency. So we have to do it legally.
Yeah.
In terms of what we actually do, that's the high level stuff.
Yeah.
That we have to have these systems under the enterprise agreement. That system of evaluating people's performance over a number of elements also leads to a pay outcome. So there's if you like, a compulsory component of that. So we have to actually do it in a certain way, not just we don't just make it up out of thin air. There are three elements that have to be considered, which is people's outputs and their behaviour and their development and their achievements against those. So that's a given, if you like, in the public sector. It's part of the governance, if you like, of the public sector. So in terms of that's why we do it.
From HR point of view, what is the input or outputs from this system?
Well, from an HR point of view, the input is the design of the templates to actually allow the managers to have a proper structure, to define what's required of people and what they're going to be measured against each year, and then also what's expected of them in terms of their behaviours against our values and behaviours statement, and what development do they need, to do those outputs and to behave properly. What development do they need, and then they can identify the appropriate development for staff, whether it's a compulsory course or a common course or something a one-off or technical training or personal skills training, whatever it might be. So we provide the system, the framework that allows the staff and the managers to actually complete what's required of them. We don't just give them a blank bit of paper and say you work it out yourselves. So we provide that system. Then, of course, what we do is maintain and manage the system and report on the completion rates and the things, and help the users of the system with any administrative problems they have, glitches, structural things. So that's our administrative role, if you like. And then the other side of that coin is that we set up the policies and the frameworks behind it too, so that people know what they're expected to do. We have, you may have heard this already, but we have a separate learning and development function. So they are responsible for delivering the identified activities, and they also use the system. So our system not only has the performance management components, but it has the automated enrolments and things in the learning and development side, and keeps all the records of people's development. So that's our role effectively. So, and they also provide L&D, and they work with us. They provide the training to the managers. What the managers need to know about having difficult conversations, having development conversations, coaching, mentoring, all those things.
I get the idea that it is used a lot for the development side of things, training and development.
Yes.
Since this is not directly related to any rewards or bonus or anything like that, how does that affect?
Well, it is directly related because development is one of the three elements of your plan, and you have to achieve a satisfactory rating or better in each of those three to get your progression pay or bonus. So you have to hit all three elements. So you have to do a good job, you have to do what's expected of you, and you get a rating in that space, either met your progression goals, we call them, which is
Yeah.
your stretch targets or the additional things you do, as well as your key duties. So you can get met progression, met key duties, or not met key duties is the rating there. So if you get not met key duties, we move straight to a underperformance plan, so process. So if you get met key duties, that might mean that you might need an informal plan to start if you're slipping.
Yeah.
It also might mean that you've done a perfectly good job and exactly as we expected you to do. But you've got to get progression, you've got to meet those stretch targets or exceed your key duties to get eligibility in that space. Under behaviours, you either get met expectations or didn't meet expectations. So you have to meet expectations. And then under development, you have to get met expectations or didn't. And what that means is you have to have achieved whatever you said you were going to do in your development space, or if you didn't, without reason, then you weren't. So you've got to meet the required standards on all three to be eligible for either pay if you're within the range, or if you're at the top of the range, you get a bonus. So that's how that works. So there's a direct link. Yes. If you don't achieve what you've identified in the development space, then you wouldn't be, even if you did your job really well and you behaved really well, if you didn't do what was expected of you in your development, you would not get a progression payment. So.
If I ask a different question from the PMS, what is your involvement in the strategic planning process?
Oh, okay. Well, the strategic plan's done by the executive, so that's the next layer above me. So we don't have any direct involvement in that, other than perhaps an informal discussion with our executive director. Where we have what happens with that strategic plan is that it then gets cascaded, if you like, to each branch manager to develop a branch plan that is based on those strategic goals that the executive have set. So executive set the strategic goals, the branch managers turn them into branch actions. And then what happens from there, and then the other responsibility, of course, once we've settled on the branch plan, is that each staff member in the branch sets up their performance plan based on the goals in the branch plan. So I'll think of an example. In the strategic goal, there might be to have there's a goal about having a first-class health and safety record and process and function at the SRO. So that's one of our strategic goals, is to have that health and safety. So that falls straight into my plan because I'm responsible for health and safety. So my goal is to deliver that first-class plan. So then I identify a range of actions to deliver that plan. That we comply with legislation, we've got a risk management approach, we've got systems to identify hazards, we rectify them, we've got ability to manage work cover claims, the whole range of things we do in OHS that are in my plan. So I have a goal in my plan that says I'll do these things, and then my OHS manager, who reports to me, also has in much more detail. He has much more detail about that. So he can see directly that everything he does, and then everything that I do, goes back to that strategic plan of saying we're going to have a good OHS plan. So that's a it's quite simple in a way, but that is exactly the link between our performance management system. It's meant to link directly to through the branch plan to the strategic plan. And that's the way our template, if you like, how our system's set up, so people can do that. We could, that's in a nutshell how that works.
If you look at the last performance management cycle, what is your evaluation on that?
Well, my sense, there's a couple of challenges we have to go back in a bit of history, but We changed our system. We upgraded our system significantly from the previous cycle after feedback from staff about the usability of it. So we haven't actually formally assessed it yet, but the feedback so far is that people have found those changes really beneficial. You know, there was a whole range of them, from the way it looked. You know, we modernised the look and feel. We made it much more kind of icon based, and we laid out the forms differently. We gave people more room to write things. We took out, we put some default in terms of our behaviours. We made people were a bit frustrated that they had to repeat the same things every year. So we made a when what we expect of people is the same. You know, so we made almost a default position where we fill out, this is what you're expected to do, and then the managers and the staff, it's more of a by exception process then, because you know 90% or 95% of people always do the right thing anyway. But for people who haven't adhered to that, the managers can identify goals for them to say, you know, look, you've got to speak properly to customers. You know, so we've identified you've got a problem because you don't speak properly to customers. You know, or for example, you know you're rude and aggressive or something like that, and what we're going to do is this year identify that you have to consistently speak properly to them. So we might send you on a development plan, you know, how to deal with difficult people or something like that, and then we expect you to comply with that thing. But for people who already do that all the time, they don't have to have any actions in there. So it's, as I say, it's by exception. But yeah. So that's been, I think anecdotally, that's been pretty well received. The other side of things is we get a bit frustrated with the timely completion of the parts of the system. So we have a target now that plans have to be done by the end of September each year. Then we have a mid-cycle review process. They have to be done by the end of February. And then we have an end-of-cycle process review, which has to be done by mid-August. So that's due this week, actually, for this cycle. And from what we can see, the completion rates we've looked at are much higher than they've been in the past. We actually did a bit of a study, and we noticed particularly that we just presented to exec a little while ago that over the years the completion rates on things has especially putting plans in place, has dropped significantly. So we've put a
drop significantly.
Yeah, they when they were supposed to have the plans in place by the end of September, you know, it used to be 80-85% completed, but it dropped perhaps to about, I'm not sure the number, maybe 60 or 70, and we had to keep chasing people to get their plans in place. If people don't get their plans in place, there's a practical problem in the learning and development. Needs can't be delivered, or may not be able to be delivered in a timely manner, you know, because that's 3 months into the cycles, July to June, so that's a problem. And also, you know, the longer you don't have a plan in place, then it's harder for managers to hold people to account for things they're supposed to have done if they don't know what they're supposed to have done. Now, most of our jobs are continuous, you know, they don't change from year to year, so often the people's plans are much the same year to year, so you don't really run into any significant risks. But if people don't have plans in place, then and it's the manager's fault, then we can't exclude them from getting progression pay, even if they don't do their job properly. So there's a technical element that we need them done. There's also just the pragmatic problem of the constant chasing up. You know, I get sick and tired of reporting.
Why don't managers give much priority to this? Do they see the value in it?
I think they do, but I just think it's competing priorities. You know, the urgent, especially the line managers, the tax managers. You know, their work's always urgent. It's very highly important. Performance management does take time. There's no doubt about it. And we've talked a little bit as a group about doing things like having a planning week. You know, where everything else gets put to one side for a week, and you say, right, this week I am doing all my plans. Everyone has to have their plans in on Monday. I'm going to see you Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then they'll all be done by the end of the week, and setting the time aside to do it. But that's a good theory. But in practice, those jobs don't allow that sort of rigidity. You know, you need a bit of flexibility around it. So, but I think part of it is that we've added a goal in all the managers' plans to get them done. You know, so in theory, Sorry, we didn't move, so the light's gone out. So in theory, managers would put their own progression pay in jeopardy if they don't do things on time, which is an expectation of them in their jobs, and it's identified there. If they don't do it in time, in theory, they would say, well, you didn't meet your duty, because your duty was, one of your duties was to do that, and you didn't do it, and you've got no reason you didn't do it. Now, in practice, the people who don't do it will always say, well, I had a big, massive court case, or, you know, I had 3 people resign and I had to do a whole lot of work myself, or there was an urgent project that had to be delivered, or sometimes it's the staff themselves that don't do their bit on time, because all of our processes start with the staff member doing their own self-evaluation or whatever it might be. So, yeah.
Would you say this is one of the biggest responsibilities, people responsibility that the managers have?
I absolutely think so. Yeah, it's critical. How else do people know what they're supposed to be doing and how they're going to be judged? You know, how they're going to be assessed. Not just what they do. You know, they can look at their position description and get a broad understanding of what they're supposed to be doing. But you know, to have that conversation to say, well, this year I want you to do. This is another example on that OHS. So my OHS manager might have, to be responsible for the OHS audits. Okay, and that'll be in his PD, that he manages the internal audit processes around our OHS risks. Okay, so that'll be in his PD, but it doesn't say anything about how. So in his performance plan, it says, I'll do the following 6 audits this year, you know, into X, Y, Z, A, B, C, and I'll do that by February, that by March, that by April, you know. So he's got in his plan the detail that he has to do for that 12-month period to fulfil that overarching responsibility of doing audits. So that's an example, and I you know, I don't have a close look, but I suspect in the tax, in the business itself, in the tax business, they'll all have, you know, investigators, for example, will have investigate cases. You know, that's in their PD. Your responsibility is to investigate tax cases. What they'll have in their performance plan is that they have to do, you know, an average of 5 cases a week, or you know, or of certain complexity or whatever it might be. And the higher grades will have, you know, do 5 really complex cases a week, whereas the beginners will have to do 5 simple cases. You know, and as they develop, they'll do, you know, 3 simple cases and 2 moderate cases. You know, then they'll do all moderate cases and a couple of high ones, and that's how you get through that grade.
Is that? Would you consider that's the core business or the
yes,
operation?
Absolutely, yes, yes.
The group I met are not in that core.
No, it's so I suppose in the way of thinking of it as a bit of a factory. Operations is our main area where they issue all the tax assessments and collect all the tax. People who object to the tax assessments can go to that group that you saw. That's one of their functions. They also do policy work, and ultimately there's a legal function at the end of that who do when it goes to court, you know, they run the court, the really complex cases. Investigations is another stream. What they do is look at potential loss, you know, people who aren't paying tax on their second property, or, you know, don't live at their residence, that, you know, so they investigate all those cases, and if they find that somebody's not complying and they owe us money, then they issue an assessment, and again the same thing happens. So it's a bit of a sausage factory, if you like. You know, you get your tax assessment. There's a couple of, you know, if we find people that didn't get an assessment that should have, we issue one. You know, we go back there. People can have that reviewed, and then if it goes to court, then there's the court thing. So that's really the business in a nutshell. There's also, in that group you met, the policy side of things, who advise the government on legislation and changes that will, you know, if there's legislation that is changing to make sure, or new tax things that come in, like the, you know, the foreign purchases tax, or the what's the other one we've got recently, the unoccupied properties tax, or those sorts of things. Then they do all the work with the government to set the legislation up for that, and then we administer it. So then we set up the processes to issue assessments to those people. Yeah. So. So yeah, it's quite a simple business really. For $15 billion or whatever it was we collected in tax last year. So.
Would you have any idea how much of the business actually goes into that department, percentage-wise?
In numbers,
Yeah.
numbers, not dollars. There's about 600 people work here, roughly.
Yeah.
So there's about, of that, there's about, I won't guess, I'll look it up. I've got my numbers here. Oh no, I wrote them down here. So there's about, in support functions, so not the direct tax business, there's about 11, 18, 29, 37, 46, 54, 65, yeah, about 100, 120 people are in support functions, like corporate functions, that's HR, accounting, IT, you know, those sorts of functions, and then and the executive, of course. So probably what's that? 130, maybe 125. So maybe about 25%. So 75% are focused on one way or another on collecting tax.
Yeah, excellent. Looking back on the performance management again, what is your recommendation or request for the strategic management team? Is there anything that they can do differently to make this work?
Not that they can do, well, I think they're doing it anyway, but as long as the branch plans are in place by the end of June, then that's what needs to happen, and that's been a focus. So they do the strategic plan a bit earlier, you know, April, May, so that the branch plans can be done in June, and then they can be rolled out so that people can. Really, they don't need to be done till the end of July, because that's when people start to put their new plans in place. So, but there's a bit of work, you know, once it's signed off. So that's important that it happens in a timely manner, you know, in a sequential manner. But yeah, not so much anything else. I think the strategic plan is pretty clear once we get that done.
Is it get communicated well, what the strategy plan is?
Yeah, it gets promoted, and Paul, the commissioner, does briefings. He just did those the other week, actually, last week, to all the staff about what's in it and what's expected at a high level. And then the branch plans, I can't speak for all the others, but when I've done my branch plan, and we did this about a month ago, I send it out to all my staff to have a look at, and I actually drill down a bit further. That's my approach, and I make a little action list, take all the things out that are in the plan, and try and document a little bit more what the actions are and who's going to do them and when we're going to do them and stuff. So there's, for all my, I've got 10 staff, so everybody knows in my space, you know, what they're expected to be doing over the year, and then when we do their plans, we just refer back to that.
You had an employee survey about.
Yeah, we do them pretty regularly. Yeah.
In terms of role clarification, how do they rate themselves overall?
I'm not sure.
Not sure. That's all right.
No, I'm not.
That's
I'm not
too
really across
specific.
the detail. Yeah. I think reasonably high from memory, but yeah, it's only a memory that people understand. I think that was one of the higher questions, ratings, that people understand how they fit into the organisation. Yeah, I think it was pretty high. I think from memory, it was in the top 5.
Okay.
You know, the in terms of the percentage that rated it as, you know, satisfactory or better, whatever it was. I think, but I'd have to double check to make sure. But,
that's all right.
Yeah.
What is your recommendation, suggestion, or request to the line managers, operations managers to make this?
Well, the constant request to them is to get them done on time, and to allocate the time and have you know, conversations with everybody about them, so they understand them. You know, yeah, that's a constant challenge, but we understand that you know that they do take priority. But and my personal challenge is that I've got to get them done, because I can't tell everybody else until mine are done. Yeah. So my guys are all done now. I've got 3 to write up. You know, when I different people do them a different way, but this is just one of my staff members. So his plan, I've gone through. That's the plan we set up, and then these are all his comments, and then I've got to put my comments in. And we've had the conversation already. That's about his duties. That's about his behaviours in terms of what he's expected to do in his, against our values, and then I've still got to put all, and there's his plan in terms of what learning he's got to do, the online modules to finish those, and to do some webinars and seminars and keep his knowledge up to date. So he's listed then, he's put a comment in on all the things he's done. Yeah. So then I've got to put my comments
they take it seriously.
Yeah, oh yeah. Well, we're HR, we have to.
Yeah.
If we didn't do it properly, if we had trouble doing it, then we wouldn't be a good look for the rest of the organisation if we didn't like doing it ourselves. But I think I think we should be good at it because we got to tell everybody else how it works too, and coach them and align them. So that's how that works. So then once I put all that in and type my comments up and do a final rating, then I'll save all that, and he'll get that back to see. He'll get a message saying your manager's now completed your review. Please read the comments and acknowledge. And then he'll be able to start his new plan. Then he can create a new plan and start and send that to me, and we'll have another conversation. Yeah.
Great. I have taken a little bit of time.
Yeah, that's okay.
Just one last question. Do you think the line managers, the operations managers, have the buy-in for this, or they are doing it just because they have to?
I think it's on a scale. Yeah, I wouldn't say everybody's, takes it to the, embraces it and makes it the cornerstone of everything they do. But on the other hand, there's a pretty good understanding of the fact that they have to do it, and that they're getting monitored in doing it. So people do it. We do get some feedback that staff find it very cursory sometimes. They don't have the conversations, but I think that's that's scattered. I don't think that's a common thing. I think most people. And I suppose there's an interesting thing about our organisation in that we have very low turnover. It's been only around 3 to 4% the last 3 years, so very low turnover. A lot of internal movement, promotions, transfers, high duties, things like that, but very low departures, and generally not that much recruitment, except this year we've got funding, so we've recruited over 100 new people, so a lot of new people going through this for the first time, but generally, I'm just thinking of the staff that report to me, apart from one who's just joined us because someone's retired, the others have all been in their jobs for 4, 5, 6, 7 years, so their plan doesn't change that much from year to year, or certainly not their development and their behaviours, because they're good. So that's a challenge sometimes to have the same conversation, to give people feedback and opportunities and things. I find that personally a bit of a challenge, So we tend to, but because we know the system well and we know each other quite well, we can work through that in a pretty quick manner and get it done. Plus we're motivated to get it done, so I can tell everybody else off. So yeah, I think generally people participated in good faith, and they understand what's expected of them, and they give it the appropriate attention. It's interesting sometimes though, from our HR point of view. I think this is pretty common everywhere, but often when a manager comes to us and says, my staff member's terrible, he doesn't do what he's told, he never behaves properly, he never gets his job done on time, we need to sack him, what do we do? And we say, well, let's have a look at our performance processes. We say, okay, well, let's have a look at his performance plans and reviews for the last few years to see where he's been getting that feedback about what he has to do to improve and what he's doing wrong. And you go into them and look, oh yes, good job. So probably the challenge for line managers is, and we support them a lot in this, but is to actually act on the people who aren't performing properly in a timely manner, and getting them to do things straight away rather than waiting for the conversation, either in January, February, or in June, July, can be a bit of a challenge at times, especially where it's kind of borderline.
Yeah.
But that's probably typical of anywhere. But it can be an HR frustration when you go, okay, so you're saying this person doesn't behave properly, but you've never told them that. So, okay, that's fine. Now you need to tell them, and then we'll go through the process. But if someone's been behaving like that for years, that starting to say, oh, actually, I know I haven't ever told you this before, but you know the way you speak to people is really bad, and you've got to stop.
Yeah.
And then you've got that problem of that. So that's a bit of a challenge in the process. Yeah.
Excellent. I'll first get this saved.
Yeah. So how many words do you have to write?
12,000 to 18,000. So.
Okay. So it's a big thing. And are you